Okay, so hear me out. Apple had another event on Tuesday. Yeah, another Apple event. Again. I'm sure you're thinking, why is Apple doing so many events? But wait till you find out. So let's just jump into it. At this event, they announced 3 new Macs based on Apple Silicon. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit of history on these chips in Mac. Back in June, Apple said they will be transitioning most of their Macs to Apple Silicon, which basically means that most Apple Macs will begin to use Apple-based SoCs or system on chips that's fully manufactured and made by Apple, transitioning from the Intel chips which they have been using from a really long time. There are 2 ways this could be a good thing, because right now Apple makes macOS, right? But the motherboard and processors on Macs are not made by Apple. Instead, they are made by Intel. So if Apple makes chips for Macs, they could get a much better integration with software and hardware and optimize iPad and iPhone apps to run on Mac. That's if they do it right. Or have they? This is the chip that they unveiled at the event for the new Macs. It's called the Apple M1 chip. This chip is super impressive. Now of course all we talk about right now is just claims. We don't have the actual M1 chip Mac with us. So all we talk about is based on what they said at the event. So the M1 chip is based on a 5nm process with 16 billion transistors. It has a 8-core CPU and a 8-core GPU. The CPU has 4 performance cores designed to run a single task as efficiently as possible while maximizing performance. Then the chip also has 4 efficiency cores to handle lighter workloads. It's similar to the chips on iPhone and iPads. But the chip does not only contain the CPUs though, it has a bunch of other things too, put together on a chip called an SoC or a system on a chip. So there's that CPU and GPU which we just talked about with a 16-core neural engine, and the RAM is also built in. So it's a highly integrated SoC where all the pieces work simultaneously to make it as efficient as possible. But there's both an upside and a downside to this. The downside is really just the RAM. It can't be user upgradable on any of the Macs with the M1 chip. And the upside is that all the parts on the chip are combined to be working efficiently with one another. Apple says this chip is 2 times faster than the latest Windows PC chip. I mean, what PC chip are they talking about here? We don't really know what chip they are comparing it to. The M1 chip will use Rosetta 2, a feature on macOS Big Sur that lets you seamlessly run apps that have not yet transitioned to support the Apple M1 chipset. Now, these are the new Macs that they talked about at the event. A new unupgraded MacBook Air, also the new MacBook Pro 13-inch, and the Mac Mini, which we'll get to in a bit. The 13-inch MacBook Pro is pretty much the same as the previous. The only difference is being that now it has the M1 chip. So it has all the features and improvements we just talked about. The 8-core CPU and the 8-core GPU that gives you 5 times graphics performance and 3 times processing power than any other Apple chipset. This performance upgrades on the M1 chip accounts for a 20-hour battery life on this MacBook. This new M1 chip MacBook has more battery life than the larger 16-inch MacBook, and this costs $1249. Then there is the MacBook Air. It's pretty much the same as the MacBook Pro 13-inch, but it has a slightly smaller battery and it's a fanless design. So there are no fans into this computer and no touch bar too. But it costs $250 less than the MacBook Pro at $999. There is also this Mac Mini, which is basically a PC version of all these Macs. So you would need an external display to connect with. According to me right now, we don't know how these new Macs will perform in real life. But anyway, when we get reviews on YouTube, we shall find out. MacBook Air is the most popular laptop Apple sells. It's also the cheapest. But now with these new performance upgrades, with the new chip, MacBook Air now gets into the MacBook Pro territory in terms of performance because they both have the same chips. So the performance will be quite equal. Another thing is that Apple said the webcam on these new Macs are better but they aren't really better in terms of quality. They just have better image signaling processing. There's one more thing that I noticed. If you go to the Apple website, you can see these new M1 MacBooks only have 2 USB-C ports instead of 4 USB-C ports that they had before. I don't know why would Apple do this, but this is odd. And then the funny thing is that Apple still sells Intel-based 13-inch MacBook Pros and MacBook Air, and those have 4 USB-C ports. But anyway, Apple now has finally started to transition their own chips on Macs, and in future we'll see how Apple will integrate these chips on their desktop side of their product lineup. So that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next one.